Welcome to our deep dive. We'll be exploring. This will make you smarter.
It's a really fascinating collection of essays.
Yeah, it's from leading thinkers,
Yeah,
across all these different fields.
it is.
And they're responding to this annual edge question.
Mm-hmm.
Heard about this?
Oh, yeah, the edge question is always so interesting.
Yeah. It's posed by John Brockman.
Right.
He's kind of like the curator of edge.
A modern-day salon.
Exactly. For all these brilliant minds. And in this book, they're tackling some pretty big concepts, stuff that could really upgrade our cognitive toolkits.
Absolutely.
So you ready to get a little smarter?
I'm always ready for that.
Okay, great. So the book starts off by encouraging us to rethink, our ideas around success and failure.
It does.
And Kevin Kelly, he argues that we should actually cultivate failure.
Yeah.
Cultivate it.
Yeah.
Really, that sounds kind of counterintuitive.
It does.
Isn't it like something we should try to avoid?
Well, that's how most people think about it. But Kelly has this different perspective.
Okay.
He thinks that failure is essential for learning.
Oh.
And he uses the example of a graphic designer who generates tons of ideas, knowing that most of them won't work.
Yeah.
Or like a dancer who's trying out new moves. Not all of them will be graceful.
Right.
But it's through these experiments, through the missteps, that we actually refine our skills
Okay.
and have breakthroughs.
So it's not about like intentionally failing, but it's about being okay with it when it happens.
Exactly.
Because it's part of the process.
Yeah.
I like that. So how does this tie into the scientific method?
Well, science itself is a process of trial and error.
That's true.
Scientists come up with these hypotheses,
Right.
and then they test them out through experiments
Yeah.
and analyze the results.
Right.
And a lot of times the initial hypothesis is wrong,
Yeah.
but those failures give scientists valuable insights
Yeah.
and guide further research.
Yeah. I never thought about it that way, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It's about embracing this iterative nature of discovery.
So it's not about getting it right the first time, every time.
No.
But it's about taking those missteps as a way to get closer to the truth.
Exactly.
I like that. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit.
Okay.
Nicholas A. Christakis, he talks about this idea of holism.
Right.
What's that all about?
So holism emphasizes that things are interconnected.
Okay.
It suggests that these wholes have properties that aren't found in their individual parts.
Okay.
Like you can think about carbon atoms. They can form graphite and they can form diamonds.
Right.
But the properties of those substances, like their hardness, color, all that, comes from how those atoms are connected, not from the atoms themselves.
That's interesting. So it's not about the individual pieces, but how they fit together.
Right.
Right.
It encourages us to consider these systems as a whole,
right,
not just the parts.
Okay.
And this can be applied to so many things like biological ecosystem, social networks, economic systems, understanding the connections. That's key to understanding the whole world around us.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Robert Provine, he introduces this concept called tan-stave-FLM, which stands for there ain't no such thing as a free lunch.
Right.
So how does that idea apply to our everyday lives?
Well, tan-stave-FLM highlights a really universal truth.
Right.
Every decision you make has trade-offs.
Okay.
And costs associated with it.
Okay.
And you see this principle everywhere in physics, economics, biology, even in your personal choices.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. So in physics, you have the laws of thermodynamics.
Right.
Energy can't be created or destroyed. It just transforms.
Right.
And in economics, you have the idea of opportunity cost. If you choose one option, you're missing out on another.
Makes sense.
And in nature, you can look at something like a peacock's tail. Yeah. It's this costly signal to attract mates, but it's beneficial for reproduction.
Yeah.
So it's worth it.
So basically everything has a price tag.
Yeah.
Even if it's not immediately obvious.
Right. Okay. Recognizing that there's no free lunch. Yeah. Can actually empower you to make better decisions.
Okay.
Because you're weighing those potential costs and benefits more carefully.
Right, because you know there are going to be hidden costs that you might not see right away.
Exactly.
So you got to kind of dig a little deeper.
You do.
Okay, I like that. Next we have Gerald Holton.
Okay.
And he's urging us to practice skeptical empiricism.
Right.
What does that involve?
It's about not just accepting things at face value.
Okay.
Especially when they're not based on evidence.
Right.
And this is particularly important in things like politics and social issues, where sometimes decisions are made more on ideology than data or critical analysis.
Right. So it's about looking for the evidence.
Yeah.
It's like not just blindly accepting what people are telling you.
Exactly. It's a call for critical thinking, questioning your assumptions.
Right.
And really demanding evidence before you form an opinion about something.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Especially with all the information out there.
Yeah.
It's hard to know what to believe.
It is. It can be really overwhelming.
Right. So this is a good tool for cutting through all that.
It is.
Okay, now let's move on to Rudy Rucker.
Okay.
He's exploring the world's inherent unpredictability.
Right.
He even claims that predicting your own actions is impossible.
He does.
Even in a deterministic world. So what's that all about?
Well, he's highlighting the roles that chance and randomness play.
Okay.
And he suggests that even in predictable situations, unexpected things can still happen.
Right.
How many times have you experienced that in your own life?
All the time.
Yeah.
I mean, life is full of surprises.
It is. You can't plan for everything.
You can't.
And Rucker reminds us that we can't anticipate every single thing that's going to happen.
Okay.
So what are we supposed to do? Just surrender to the chaos?
Yeah, I mean, what's the point of planning if anything can happen?
Well, not necessarily surrendering to chaos.
Okay.
But acknowledging that we can't control everything.
Okay.
And being adaptable.
Okay.
Because unexpected events aren't always failures in your planning. Sometimes it's just the world being unpredictable.
Okay, so rolling with the punches.
Yeah.
Being able to adapt.
Exactly.
Okay. So Charles Seif seems to take this idea even further. He argues that a perfectly predictable universe doesn't even exist outside our minds.
It's true.
So is he saying that everything is random?
Well, he's challenging this notion that the universe is deterministic.
Oh, yeah?
That everything's predetermined.
Right.
And he's urging us to embrace the unknown.
Okay.
Because by acknowledging randomness, you can actually make better judgments because you have a less rigid view of the future.
Interesting. So it's like a mental flexibility exercise.
It is.
To be open to all the possibilities.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Now, this is really interesting. Clifford Pickover, he introduces this concept of a kaleidoscopic discovery engine.
Right.
What is that?
Well, he's talking about this phenomenon of simultaneous discovery.
Simultaneous discovery?
Yeah, like when multiple people come up with the same scientific breakthrough independently around the same time.
Really?
Yeah.
So what are some examples of that?
Well, you have the electrolytic process for refining aluminum.
Okay.
That was discovered independently by Charles Martin Hall and Paul Heroult.
Okay.
And then you have calculus. Invented by both Isaac Newton and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz.
Wow.
And then there's the telephone.
Okay.
Developed almost simultaneously by Alexander Graham Bell and Elisha Gray.
So it's like these discoveries were just waiting to happen.
Yeah, Pickover kind of suggests that there's this deeper connection, this shared intellectual landscape where these ideas sort of crystallize.
Right.
Independently.
Yeah.
In the minds of all these brilliant people.
So are you saying it's not just about the individual genius?
Not always. Sometimes it's about the time being right for a certain discovery.
Interesting. So it's like this collective progress.
It is.
Okay. Now, Rebecca Newberger Goldstein, she talks about inference to the best explanation. How does that relate to our everyday lives?
Well, it's a way of making sense of the world. Especially with all the information we encounter.
Right.
Our minds are always trying to understand things.
Right.
And this process involves weighing different explanations.
Okay.
And choosing the one that fits the evidence best.
So it's kind of like detective work.
It is.
Gathering clues, evaluating theories, and finding the most plausible answer.
Exactly.
And we do this all the time, right?
Yeah,
like when our car breaks down or when we're trying to understand a news story. Okay. So how is this helpful in today's world, where we have so much information coming at us from all directions?
Well, it encourages us to be critical of the information we consume.
Okay.
To evaluate different perspectives, to assess how logical they are.
Right.
And choose the explanation that's best supported by the evidence.
So it's about not just blindly accepting information, but really thinking about it critically.
Precisely. It's a powerful tool for cutting through the noise.
Okay. That's a good one. Now let's talk about cognitive load.
Okay.
I think we can all relate to feeling overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information
Sure you can.
we encounter every day.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Cognitive load refers to the mental effort involved in working memory.
Okay.
And when we're bombarded with information, our working memory gets overloaded.
Okay.
And then it's harder to process and remember things.
Right.
So it's important to recognize the limits of how much we can actually handle.
Okay. So what can we do about it? How do we manage this information overload?
One key is to be more selective about the information you consume.
Okay.
So instead of trying to absorb everything,
Yeah.
just focus on what's relevant to your goals and interests.
Okay. So like being more mindful of our information diet.
Exactly.
Choosing quality over quantity.
Yeah.
Okay. What are some other practical strategies for managing cognitive load?
Well, you can break down complex tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Right.
That can reduce the strain on your working memory.
Okay.
You can also use visual aids and other memory techniques
Okay.
to help you process and retain information.
Okay. So like using different tools and techniques to help us remember things better.
Right.
Okay. So the key is to remember that our mental resources are limited.
They are.
And we need to use them wisely.
We do.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when it comes to making decisions,
Okay.
what role does the controlled experiment play?
So a controlled experiment
Yeah.
is a way to test our hypotheses in a systematic way.
Okay.
We isolate different variables to figure out what's really causing what.
Okay.
We gather empirical evidence.
So it's about moving beyond just our gut feelings
It is.
and looking at the data.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this approach isn't just for science.
Okay.
You can use it in everyday life, too.
Can you give me an example?
Imagine testing a new marketing strategy.
Okay.
You can use a controlled experiment to see if it's really working
Okay.
by controlling all those variables.
Right.
You can isolate the impact of that strategy and see how effective it actually is.
So it's about testing our assumptions.
It is.
Not just assuming we know the answer.
Right.
Okay. And gathering evidence
Yeah.
before jumping to conclusions.
Exactly.
Okay. I like that. Finally, let's talk about this intriguing concept of a Gedanken experiment.
Oh, yeah.
Or a thought experiment.
You're right.
What's that all about?
It's a technique used in theoretical physics
Okay.
to explore scenarios where real-world experiments are impossible. So, like, you can't really create a black hole in a lab, but you can think about what would happen if you did.
Okay.
And that's a thought experiment.
So it's like a mental simulation.
It is.
To test a hypothesis without actually needing a physical lab.
Exactly.
And this can lead to some really interesting insights.
It can.
A classic example is Schrodinger's cat.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Where he's talking about this paradoxical nature of quantum superposition.
It's a great thought experiment.
Yeah. And it really makes you think.
It does.
So I feel like my mind is already expanding.
That's great.
I'm eager to see what other cognitive tools are out there.
Me too.
All right. Let's take a quick break and then we'll come back and explore some more of these fascinating concepts.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to our exploration of This Will Make You Smarter.
We've got a lot more to cover.
Yeah, we do. We've only just scratched the surface. So let's dive into John Tooby's analysis of causality.
Okay.
He says that we often oversimplify cause and effect relationships and introduces this concept of nexus causality.
Yeah.
What is nexus causality?
Well, it suggests that most outcomes aren't just the result of one single cause.
Right.
But a whole bunch of factors coming together.
Okay.
Like Tolstoy's analogy in War and Peace.
Okay.
An apple falls from a tree.
Right.
Not just because of gravity.
Yeah.
But because of the weakening stem. The sun drying it out.
Okay.
The wind blowing. The apple getting heavier.
So it's like all these things happening at the same time.
Exactly.
To create this one outcome.
Right.
It's about recognizing the complexity of events.
It is.
All the different influences at play. Okay. So moving on, David G. Myers talks about self-serving bias.
Right.
So what is that and how does that affect us?
It's this tendency to take credit for our successes, but blame outside factors for our failures.
Oh, yeah. I totally do that.
Yeah, we all do.
Like when things go well, it's because I'm awesome. But when things go wrong, it's because of bad luck or someone else messed up.
Exactly.
It's easier to protect our ego that way.
It is.
But how is that harmful?
Well, it can stop us from growing.
Okay.
If we're always blaming external factors, we don't learn from our mistakes.
Right.
And we don't get better.
Okay. So owning up to our mistakes is important for self-improvement.
It is.
Got it. Now, Gary Marcus discusses cognitive humility.
Okay.
He says that our minds, while amazing, aren't perfect.
They're not.
What does he mean by that?
He points to all this research in cognitive psychology that shows the limitations of human memory and reasoning. Our memories are flawed, we get distracted easily, and we're prone to biases.
Wow. So we're not as smart as we think we are.
Well, are capable of incredible things, but we also make mistakes.
Right.
And recognizing that is crucial for becoming better thinkers.
Okay. So we need to be aware of our limitations.
We do.
Acknowledge our blind spots. And be open to the possibility that we might be wrong.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, W. Tecumseh Fitch, he explores instincts to learn.
Right.
How does that challenge the nature versus nurture debate?
Well, he uses the example of bird song.
Okay.
So birds are born with the ability to sing.
Okay.
But the specific songs they learn depend on their environment.
So it's not just one or the other.
It's not. It's both nature and nurture working together.
Right. Our genes give us certain predispositions, but our experiences shape how they actually develop.
Exactly.
Interesting. Now, Michael Shermer, in his essay, Think Bottom Up, Not Top Down, suggests that this applies to a lot of different areas.
He does.
So can you explain that a little bit more?
Well, he argues that a lot of complex systems, like molecules, ecosystems, societies, they emerge from the bottom up, not from some top-down design.
Okay, so can you give me an example?
Sure. Think about water.
Okay.
It's a self-organized property of hydrogen and oxygen.
Right.
Or life itself. It arises from simple interactions between molecules.
So there's no grand plan?
Not necessarily.
They're just simple interactions leading to complex outcomes.
Right.
Okay. And this also applies to social phenomena.
It does.
Cultural innovations, societal changes, they often come from individuals interacting.
They do.
Not from leaders or institutions.
It's the power of collective intelligence.
Wow. So we can create amazing things by working together.
We can.
Okay. Now, Stephen M. Koslin introduces constraint satisfaction as a cognitive tool for problem solving.
Right.
So can you unpack that a little bit?
Well, it's really helpful for tackling complex problems.
Okay.
When you have a lot of different constraints.
Okay.
Like imagine arranging furniture in a room.
Yeah.
You got limited space, you have your style preferences, you need it to be functional.
Right.
And maybe you have a budget.
Right.
Constraint satisfaction is about finding an arrangement that meets all of those criteria as best as possible.
So finding the optimal solution.
Yeah.
Given all the limitations.
Exactly.
There's not always a perfect solution.
There isn't.
But we can find the best possible one.
We can.
Okay. Now, Stuart Brand, in his essay, Pace Layering, applies this to how societies and technologies change.
He does.
So can you elaborate on that?
Well, he argues that different parts of a system change at different rates.
Okay.
Some layers are stable, some are dynamic.
Okay. So could you give me an example of that?
Sure. Think of a building.
Okay.
The foundation is built to last a long time.
Right.
That's the stable layer.
Okay.
The structure might be renovated every few decades.
Okay.
That changes more slowly.
Right.
Then the skin, like the facade and windows, that changes more often.
Yeah.
To keep up with trends.
Right.
And then the space plan, the furniture, that changes the fastest.
Okay. So it's like different layers moving at different speeds.
Exactly.
And understanding that can help us make better decisions.
It can.
About how we interact with these complex systems.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, Kevin Dunbar, he discusses the virtues of negative results.
Right.
So what does he have to say about that?
Well, he argues that in science, when you get results that don't support your hypothesis, those negative results are actually really valuable.
Really? I would think that would be frustrating.
It can be.
You know, like you did all that work for nothing.
Right.
But how are they valuable?
Well, they can help refine our understanding.
Okay.
They can point us in new directions.
Okay.
And ultimately, they can lead to stronger theories.
So it's about embracing the unexpected.
It is.
Viewing setbacks as opportunities for learning.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, this is a new one for me. Terence Szymanowski talks about supervenience.
Okay.
What is that?
Imagine an image made up of pixels.
Okay.
The image as a whole depends on the arrangement of those pixels.
Okay.
Supervenience is about the relationship between different levels of organization.
Okay, so can you give me a real-world example?
Sure. Think about water.
Okay.
It's fluid. It can dissolve things.
Yeah.
Those properties depend on the properties of its atoms.
Okay.
Hydrogen and oxygen.
So chemistry supervenes on physics.
In a sense, yes.
Okay. So different scientific disciplines are interconnected?
They are.
And they build upon each other?
Exactly.
Okay. Now, Clay Shirky explores the Pareto principle.
Right.
also known as the 80-20 rule.
Yes.
I've heard of that.
Yeah.
But how does it apply to our lives?
Well, it states that 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes.
Okay.
And this shows up everywhere.
Okay.
From wealth distribution to customer complaints to the words we use.
Really?
Yeah.
So a small number of factors have a big impact.
Exactly.
Okay.
And understanding this can help us focus our efforts.
Okay.
Like, a business might find that 80% of their revenue comes from 20% of their customers.
Right.
So they can focus on keeping those customers happy.
Makes sense. So it's about finding the vital few and ignoring the trivial many.
Right.
Okay.
And you can apply this to personal productivity, too.
Really? How so?
Maybe 80% of your stress comes from 20% of your tasks.
Oh, yeah. That sounds about right.
So focus on managing those tasks.
Okay.
And you'll reduce your stress.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, Richard Nisbett introduces the focusing illusion.
Okay.
How does this affect us?
Well, it's about overestimating the importance of things we're currently focused on.
Okay. So could you give me an example?
Sure. We might think our job or relationship is the most important thing for our happiness.
Okay.
But research shows that other factors, like our personality, social connections, sense of purpose, play a bigger role in the long run.
So we're kind of misled by our own perceptions.
We are.
Because we're so focused on the present moment.
Yeah.
Okay. So how can we overcome this illusion?
By taking a step back.
Okay.
And considering the bigger picture, what really matters for our happiness in the long term.
So it's about having a more balanced perspective.
It is.
Okay. Now, Daniel Kahneman explores the effect heuristic.
Right.
What is that exactly?
Well, it suggests that our emotions, our likes and dislikes, often drive our decisions, even when we think we're being rational.
Really? So our gut feelings can override our logical thinking?
They can.
Okay. So why does that happen?
Our brains are wired to respond quickly to emotions.
Okay.
And sometimes that bypasses logical thinking.
So we need to be aware of our emotions.
We do, and how they might be influencing our decisions.
Right.
So that we can make more objective choices.
That makes sense. Now, Robert Sapolsky explores the biology of our better angels.
Okay.
Is he suggesting that there's a biological basis for altruism and cooperation?
Well, he talks about how neurochemicals and hormones affect social behaviors.
Okay.
Like oxytocin, the love hormone, plays a role in bonding and trust. And dopamine is associated with reward.
So these chemicals influence our good deeds.
It's not that simple.
Okay.
But Sapolsky suggests they create a foundation for pro-social behavior.
Interesting. So we're wired for kindness.
In a way, yes.
Okay. Now, Jonathan Haidt presents this concept of contingent superorganisms.
Right.
What are those?
It's about how humans can form groups that are highly coordinated and cooperative, often in response to threats or challenges.
Okay, so can you give me an example?
Think of a sports team, a military unit, or volunteers after a disaster.
Okay. So it's like we have this hidden ability to work together.
We do.
When we need to.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, Brian Eno challenges the idea of the solitary genius.
He does.
With his concept of genius.
Right.
So what's his perspective on creativity?
Well, he thinks that great innovations often come from a genius.
A genius?
Yeah, it's a collaborative environment where ideas are exchanged freely, like the Renaissance in Florence.
Right.
Or the Bloomsbury Group in London.
Okay.
Talented people inspiring each other.
Leading to amazing bursts of creativity.
Exactly.
So it's about creating the right environment for innovation.
It is.
Okay. Now, Stephen Strogatz talks about collective synchrony.
Right.
What's that all about?
It's about how things can synchronize their behavior. Spontaneously.
So can you give me an example?
Sure. Like fireflies that flash in unison.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Or crickets chirping together.
Okay. It's like they're all following some invisible conductor.
It is.
So how does this happen?
It emerges from simple interactions.
Okay.
Each firefly adjusts its flashing based on its neighbors.
Okay.
And eventually they all sync up.
Wow. So simple rules can lead to complex patterns.
They can.
And this applies to humans too, right?
It does.
Like synchronized clapping or dancing, or even the spread of ideas.
Right.
So our individual actions can create these larger patterns.
It can.
That's amazing. Okay, so we've covered a lot in this episode.
We have.
But I'm excited to see what other insights this book has in store.
Me too.
Welcome back to our final exploration of This Will Make You Smarter. We've learned so much already.
We have.
I'm ready for more. What else can we uncover?
Well, let's start with Jay Rosen. He explores these wicked problems.
Wicked problems? What are those? They sound scary.
They're complex problems,
Okay.
really tough to solve.
Like what?
Think about climate change,
Okay.
poverty, political polarization.
Yeah.
They're all messy, interconnected,
Right.
hard to define, and any solution can have unintended consequences.
So are they unsolvable, these wicked problems?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
But we need a different approach. We need to accept the complexity, embrace the uncertainty.
Okay. So no easy answers.
Right. Simple solutions or top-down approaches, those probably won't work.
Got it. So we need to be more adaptable in our problem solving.
Exactly.
Okay. Speaking of adaptation, Daniel Goleman discusses the importance of cognitive bandwidth.
Mm-hmm.
How does that relate to our mental abilities?
Well, Goleman says our cognitive bandwidth, our ability to focus, learn, make good decisions, it's a limited resource.
Okay.
And things like stress, poverty, they can deplete it.
So are you saying our mental resources are like a muscle? They can get tired?
Yeah, in a way.
Okay.
When we're under chronic stress or facing tough situations, our cognitive bandwidth shrinks.
Okay.
And it becomes harder to think clearly, manage our emotions, make good choices.
So like if you're living in poverty, that could make it even harder to escape poverty.
Exactly, because your cognitive bandwidth is limited.
Right. So we need to address those underlying factors like stress and poverty.
We do, to help people thrive.
Okay. Makes sense. Now this one is a big one. Sam Harris tackles the illusion of free will.
That's a classic debate.
It is. What's his take?
He looks at neuroscience and psychology
Okay.
and argues that our sense of control is mostly an illusion.
Really? So we're not in control of our choices?
It's a tough idea to swallow.
It is.
But Harris believes the science points that way.
Okay.
He thinks our conscious experience of making a decision, it's more like a story we tell ourselves afterward.
Okay.
It's not what's really happening in our brains.
Wow. So if we don't have free will, what about responsibility?
Right. That's a big question.
It is.
Harris says even if free will is an illusion, we're still responsible for our actions.
Okay.
But we need to understand the factors that shape our behavior, our genes, our upbringing, our environment.
So instead of blaming people, we should try to understand them.
Right. And create environments that encourage good behavior.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Eh.
Now, Daniel C. Dennett, he offers tools for thinking about consciousness.
Right.
Consciousness is a big mystery. How do we even begin to understand it?
Dennett says don't look for a single explanation.
Okay.
Use a variety of concepts and methods.
Okay. So like a toolbox.
Exactly.
Okay.
He believes consciousness arises from all these different brain processes working together.
Okay.
And to understand it, we need to look at neuroscience, psychology, computer science, even philosophy.
It's like a big puzzle.
It is.
We need all the pieces to see the whole picture.
We do.
So this has been an amazing journey.
It has.
So many incredible ideas. What's the main takeaway from all this? From this will make you smarter?
I think it's about expanding our cognitive toolkits,
Okay.
learning new concepts, challenging our assumptions, seeing different viewpoints.
Yeah.
That helps us navigate the world.
And make it a better place.
Exactly.
Okay, so we need to be more curious, more critical,
Yeah.
more engaged with the world.
That's how we keep learning and growing.
Okay, so what were the 10 key insights we learned?
Well, first, we should cultivate failure.
Right.
Not be afraid of it. Yeah. Second, remember that systems are interconnected. That's holism.
Okay. Third, there's no free lunch.
Right. Everything has a cost.
Fourth, practice skeptical empiricism.
Always ask for evidence.
Fifth, the world is unpredictable.
Be ready for anything.
Sixth, embrace the unknown.
Don't be afraid of randomness.
Seventh, simultaneous discovery happens.
We're all connected.
Eighth, use inference to the best explanation.
Be a good detective.
Ninth, manage your cognitive load.
Don't overload your brain.
And 10th, use all these different tools and concepts.
By making decisions and understanding complex systems.
This has been an incredible journey.
It has.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into This Will Make You Smarter.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you. Until next time, keep those minds sharp.
And keep learning.